Hello, welcome to the Interstate Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children Council meeting. Lisa will go ahead and call the roll.
Director Skurlock.
Here.
Director Russell.
Whoops, here.
Director Colonna. You're on mute.
And here.
Thank you. Director Wheeler.
Here.
Colt Gill.
I'm here, thanks.
Is Director, I do not see Director Valise on. He let me know he's trying to get on by phone, so he'll be joining us shortly. Vice Chair Bates.
Here.
Chair Howard.
Here.
And
Director, Vice Chair Martina Zapata is excused for today's meeting. I wanted to give everyone a little tip on technology if you didn't already know this. But if you are struggling to get your mouse over to unmute, you can actually press the space bar, especially during roll call, to just get a quick yes or I out. And then when you let go of the space bar, it'll go back to mute. So that's one way of doing it quickly. I just discovered that after 9 months of COVID, but you know, we learn as we go. So let us go ahead, and I'm going to turn this, our presentation over to Kelly Sheese, who's the Regional School Liaison for the Navy Region Northwest, and she's going to give us a presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm up in Bremerton, Washington, but for those of you I haven't met before, I'm actually from Oregon via Eastern Washington. So I grew up in Eastern Washington, but then lived in Portland, went to Concordia, taught in Reynolds School District and in Hillsborough School District before the Navy brought us up here to Bremerton. So we've been here now, I think 8 years. So the Admiral really wanted to be with us today, but we have a VIP from DC here. And so he was obligated to do that. So he recorded a video message, and then I just have a few points that I wanted to share with you all today, and then take any questions that you might have. So I practiced with Lisa. Let me see if I can still pass Zoom meetings.
Hello, Oregon State Board of Education and Commission members. I'm Rear Admiral Stephen Barnett, the Commander of Navy Region Northwest. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. I wish I could join you live, but unfortunately, my schedule has been quite full. I still wanted to quickly introduce myself and share a little bit about your Navy in this great place called the Northwest. I took command of Navy Region Northwest back in March of this year, and that was right in the middle of COVID. I know that throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we've all been working hard to adjust our normal day-to-day processes without sacrificing health and safety. I recognize and appreciate all the efforts that each of you continue to do in keeping our students safe and still give them the quality education they need and deserve. This is extremely important, and I understand the challenges that you actually face, as I come from a family of educators. The Navy's presence in the region dates back to the mid-1800s, and we are proud to call this great place home. Navy Region Northwest is the third largest fleet concentration area behind San Diego and Norfolk. Our 4 installations in Washington State support a wide variety of ships, submarines, and aircraft. I know there's a fairly large number of veterans that live in Oregon, but we have a small component of active duty folks that live there. For instance, we have a crew at Boardman and a few Navy operational support and recruiting centers. Occasionally, Navy ships receive maintenance at the Portland shipyard, and our personnel participate in community engagement along the Oregon coast. And as always, the Navy is proud to send ships to the annual Portland Rose Festival Fleet Week. The Navy is a key part of the national defense strategy, and we serve to preserve our nation's interest. This includes keeping sea lanes open to trade, which is important to the prosperity of our great nation and coastal states like Oregon. We cannot, and I'll say that again, we cannot accomplish our mission without the support of our communities, and that includes you. We may not be a large presence, but there are some Navy families and children in Oregon, and the care and education of those children are very important to us. So, on behalf of the nearly 200,000 members of your Navy Northwest family, I would like to say thank you all for being a part of this commission and for working hard to make a difference for our youth. If you have any questions, my school liaison officer is here to assist. Thank you again for this opportunity, and stay healthy. Go Navy, fly Navy, beat Army.
All right, let's see. Yay, we passed. Okay. Sorry if any of you are Army veterans, but he has to get the beat Army in every speech that he does. So, but school liaisons are the main point of contact for installations and school districts and families and the community at large. So I work anywhere from the State Department of Education's with the admirals, the base installation commanders, all of our school districts. So anything that is involving military families we're involved in. So even down in Oregon, if you have military families that are having challenges and issues, I am here to help you. And then I have colleagues at Joint Base Lewis McChord that have more Army and Air Force expertise if you have those families as well. So we focus on the stressors and the complications of military life. We give professional development trainings, we give briefings. Basically, if you anything that has to do with military, we can assist. So that's about what we do. So when I talked with Cindy before, we were talking about what kind of challenges military families were facing during COVID. So just like our civilian counterparts, the virtual learning is very stressful on our military families. And what we're seeing right now is families with a deployed service member struggling the most, obviously, right? Because they're taking on everything for both parents. And then some families even have a single parent that is deployed and grandparents or a friend, neighbor is taking care of the children, and that's an additional stress as well. So COVID has put a wrinkle into everything that we deal with right now, right? Moving was a big issue over the summer. There was a stop order for moves from DC. So no one across the world was moving. That backlogged up until August, until people were finally able to start moving. And we've actually had some families, the ship that the Admiral mentioned that was coming from Japan to Portland, even though families aren't ordered to make that move, families have moved so they can pay for it on their own and still move. That ship is eventually going to end up in Everett. So instead of waiting in Japan or going straight to Everett, some families have moved along the way. So we did have a couple of questions about Portland schools and one about Beaverton schools. And it wasn't any just how to get connected, because a lot of times they have internet issues back and forth and trying to get into websites in the States. So those have all been resolved. And then I wanted to share with you some of our resources. So these are all free resources that you could access. Any of your school districts in Oregon could use them. The tutor.com is one of the best free resources. Any DoD civilian or military person and their dependents are able to use it. So 24/7 free tutoring, you can get on and request a tutoring session. They even have free SAT and ACT prep. So they have a lot of great resources, and even some community college level classes are available as well. And then Msec, the Military Child Education Coalition, they provide a lot of great resources, parent training, educator training, resources. They have deployment kits, all sorts of things. We buy a lot of things from them as well to share with our school counselors. But even if you just want to learn about where in the world do I start to help, Msec has a lot of great resources to get you started. And then Military One Source, if you've never heard of it before, it is all things Department of Defense, military. They have counseling, they have budgeting, they have education, any sort of resource. If you have any family that has any sort of issue and you're wondering, how can I help? The first stop would be to go to Military One Source. And you can Google, or not, it's not Googling in there, right? It's searching by any topic in their website, and you're going to get loads of information. And then families as well, they kind of forget that that exists, but it's paid for by the DoD and it doesn't cost them a thing for any of the resources that are in there. And then lastly, I can't go without mentioning that April is the month of the military child. So if you want to do any sort of celebrations, or if it's still virtual by April, virtual celebrations, and you need some ideas or some resources, please feel free to contact me. My email is at the beginning of the slides, and then I'm happy to share with anybody who would possibly want to do a month of the military child celebration. So I thank you for having me today. And as always, let me know if you need anything. So happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Kelly? All right, it looks like we do not. Thank you so much, Kelly, for your presentation and for your information sharing.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to ODE Cindy Hunt, who's the Oregon Compact Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Howard. And I wanted to thank Kelly and Rear Admiral Barnett for participating in our meeting today. I know especially the Rear Admiral has many demands on his time. And Kelly and I have had a goal of having him in this meeting for a couple of years. So Kelly, we almost got there. So, but I wanted to extend a thank you, please, Kelly, to him for making time for us today. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to take you through kind of my activities over the past year. And certainly if you have questions, just let me know. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, so I think you're all seeing that. Yes. Okay. Great. So just to remind everybody, you all are part of Oregon's Compact Commission, and all of the 50 states that participate and the District of Columbia are all required to have Compact Commissions and a commissioner that represents the state as part of the annual or as part of the national organization. So we are part of that national organization. They go by MIC3, and there's their little logo there. And so there's activities that I participate at the national level in as part of being Oregon's designee, as part of this. Okay. So to remind everybody, the mission and vision of the national organization is basically successful educational transitions for children of military personnel. And then through the Interstate Compact, MIC addresses key educational and transitional issues encountered by children in military families. One of the characteristics of the military families is that they move a lot during a child's educational career. And so that's why these transitions from school to school, state to state, learning environment to learning environment are so important. Okay. So the core values of MIC3, it starts with doing the right thing for children. I think that's something that all of us can relate to. Resolving issues fairly, respect for all, transparency in everything we do, and committed to making a difference. A couple of facts and figures. These facts and figures, I think, are about a year. The most up-to-date I could get was about a year. So around the world, there's approximately 1.5 million dependent children of the US military, ages 0 to 18. The compact only covers school-age children. So of those, about 66% of those kids are covered in the compact. So a little over 1 million. So Oregon's share of that is about 1,600. We're considered to be a small state regarding the compact, unlike our neighbors to the north and south who have, tens of thousands of children covered by the compact. We're relatively small, but we definitely have kids here in Oregon that are covered. A couple of things, Kelly talked a little bit about this, like so many of the organizations, MIC3 has also been doing some COVID-19 response. One of the things that they've done on their website is they've taken information from all of the state Department of Ed, so including Oregon's, on COVID-19 and what's the information and guidance being given. And so they're updating it weekly. And so for a family, like a military family, say that was moving from, say, Rhode Island to Oregon, they can go to that website and go, oh, okay, so this is what Oregon's doing specifically for COVID. So I reviewed what was on their website in preparation for this meeting for Oregon. And so, for example, they have links to our Ready School Safe Learners guidance there. They have some links to like our webpage that has more information about COVID, more guidance documents. They have articles for some states about reopening or not reopening with the schools. So when you look at it, it's a great resource for families and it's kind of a one-stop shop, right? So that was one of the biggest things they've been doing. Another thing that's happening is that I've heard from my counterparts in other states is that virtual learning, right? Distance learning, just like Oregon, other states are doing this too. So they're getting more and more questions about, like from military families, so they're moving, but they want to enroll early. And now they kind of have that option because we're in distance learning, or they want to stay enrolled in the school where they've been, even though their family has moved and they're going to another state. So there's been a few other questions kind of generated because of this environment. The other big thing they did is their annual meeting was virtual this year. And was still held October 1st and 2nd. It was scheduled originally to be in Little Rock, Arkansas, but it was not. I attended the virtual meeting from the comfort of my home here in Kaiser. And there was different business that was done. The big highlights from the meeting was there was some changes to policies that were adopted at the annual meeting. So there was a policy on how to adopt policies, amendments, and repeals. You could chuckle about that, and I would, if, but it's also an organization that is maturing, right? And this was a hot topic that came up a year ago and was sort of hotly debated because when you don't have processes in place, people are like, wait a minute, how does this work? And how do I have input into this? So, so this being put through, I think, is a good thing. And I think it's just a sign of an organization maturing. They also did policies that were more financial relating to operating reserves and investment policies. It's, all of the 50 states, I'll go into it a little bit more, pay dues into the national organization. And they see that as a trust, in that they want to hold, the requisite amount of money in reserve for times of flux, like what we're going through now. But also, how do we invest that in an appropriate way that also earns dollars? And that's what they've started doing. And so these policies kind of tease that out a bit. Okay. But the big topic at the national meeting was the inclusion of National Guard and Reserve under the MIC3. So currently, it's only active duty military of the different branches. And so there's been this proposal to include National Guard and Reserve. One of the reasons, so there's a couple of things that makes this a little more controversial. On the, plus side, that many National Guard families, they can be deployed overseas. They can be deployed, even in other states, across the state, that kind of thing. So in that way, it makes them more similar to like an MIC3 child or family, right? Also, our National Guard is being called upon in various ways. And so MIC3 is certainly an organization who wants to support those families. So that's how this came up. To actually do it requires all 50 states plus the District of Columbia to open up the compact in a legislative session and amend it. And what many people know is when you open up something, it's open for other changes as well. So politically, that's a huge deal. There is a potential cost to states because the dues may go up. It would also require additional resources in some of the states because there's additional kids coming in, right? And so we would anticipate more questions, more, that kind of stuff, right? But some states already have adopted laws like outside of the compact to sort of it's kind of informally applying it to National Guard. So taking the standards in the compact and saying it applies to National Guard, right? So it's not formally part of the compact, but these states are starting to address it. So that's, some of the issues. So in Oregon, I took a look at some of the numbers and how this would impact us. So I mentioned earlier that we have currently a little over 1,600 kids that are covered in the compact. And these are the different branches, how they break down. So go Air Force. Air Force has a little over 1,000 kids. We don't have, those bases other than NOAA. We do have a NOAA base in Newport. That number I noticed has gone up. Last time I looked at the NOAA numbers for numbers of kids, we were in the 5 to 6 range. So it's doubled, as we might expect, I suppose. But so this is how we break down currently, right? Well, at least as of July 31st. So if National Guard and Reserve were added into Oregon, we would have an additional 4,900 kids who would be covered by the compact. And this is how those kids break down. So you see predominantly it's in the Army National Guard. So you see that there would be, for Oregon, for example, a significant additional number of kids, right, covered. But we would still be seen as a relatively small state under the compact, even with an additional 4,900 kids, just to be clear. So I mentioned we all pay annual dues. Oregon's current dues to the compact are $2,300. That's the lowest amount a state can pay. The compact, they calculate based on the number of kids, but they have a floor and a ceiling, right, that they call a threshold. So $2,300 is the floor. The ceiling is $69,000 currently. So Oregon currently pays $2,300. Under the proposal, we would pay a little over $7,500 with the addition of the National Guard. So we'd actually move a little bit out of that small school band into a little bit bigger, right? So other states under the proposal would pay anywhere from about $1,400 to over $100,000. So if you are a state like, say, California, going from 69,000 to a little over 100,000, that's, a little more significant, right? And that's, where they would go without the threshold, right? I would anticipate some sort of threshold adoption to happen. For Oregon, it's the same amount, regardless of if they were to pass a threshold or not, just by virtue of where our numbers would fall in the scale. So it would still be about 7,500. Yeah, so that's part of the issue going on. So they're continuing to study this. Definitely the leadership at MIC3 views this as the most controversial issue. There's a lot of questions around it, how it would apply, opening it up, that kind of thing. So there's going to be more to come on this, but I wanted it kind of on your radar, right? So Oregon specific activity, some of the things I've done in the last year. I don't get a lot of calls about the compact, and my calls I get from my fellow compact commissioners this year. So I did meet with the chair of the national MIC3, and I have another one of those meetings scheduled to get plugged into some of the national issues and that kind of thing. I participated in the subcommittee, the rules subcommittee, which developed that policy on policies. So that was fun. And then met with the Washington commissioner recently and talked about COVID and the compact and so forth. And then also met with the NOAA leaders and then the Washington, California commissioners because we're trying to establish a closer relationship with NOAA, right? So there's NOAA bases, like I said, there's one in Newport, Oregon, but there's also bases in Washington and California. But the leaders for NOAA are on the Pacific coast are located in Oregon. So that anyway, we're developing that relationship. The leaders for NOAA are new to the compact. It's learning for them. So I think it's good. So those are some of our activities that, are my activities I've been doing in the last year related to that. Okay, and here's some additional information, and just, this is just a small snippet of the kinds of resources that are available on the MIC3 national webpage. And there's a link there, and I'll open it up for questions.
Do we have any questions for Cindy?
I just wanted, this is Lieutenant Colonel Bates, the 1606 that you showed on that one slide, it looked like when you broke it down, showing Air Force with over 1,000, that it exceeded the 1606. Can you kind of speak to some of those numbers?
Yeah, where I got those numbers from were from MIC3. Let me go back here. And it's interesting because we are now starting to collect data on military families under ESSA. And I can tell you our data is higher than 1,600 under ESSA. I think the last time I looked, it was over 2,000. So there's a discrepancy in the numbers. And it is also something that's been discussed. I think there's different reasons for it in the way that the numbers are developed. I think these are gotten through Department of Defense, if I'm not mistaken, whereas ESSA numbers, for example, are gotten directly from families who are reporting. I'm not sure if all states have the discrepancy, but I know Oregon does. So.
Okay. And I know at the Air Force, so down in K Falls, there's an active duty detachment down there. So I don't know if that has increased those numbers too.
Yeah, I assume that's why it's a little over 1,000 in the Air Force, as far as, and being, a little bit higher, right?
Right.
Yeah. And other folks on here, we have recruiters in Oregon, for example. We also, like Kelly talked about, you can have a grandparent watching a child. Well, that grandparent can be located in another state that's not in the base, right? So that's how we come to our numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Cindy, or Lieutenant Colonel?
Yeah.
I can help a little bit as well. Sometimes what happens is in the active duty count that we receive from DMDC, it breaks down just DOD, and then Coast Guard is separate. So sometimes they forget to add Coast Guard back into that total because they're listed separately on the DMDC report. So if you round up that Coast Guard number to the 1,600, that should probably be closer.
Yeah, okay. Okay, and then the other thing is it's very interesting to have the inclusion of the National Guard and Reserve. I know that the compact covers Title 10, so when National Guard are activated, they actually get covered under the Title 10 clause. I'm just wondering, Cindy, if you can speak to, is there a discussion around the statuses, whether people fall underneath Title 10 or Title 32?
Yes, absolutely there is. And that highlights one of the issues with this, because part of the discussion is that they need to define it very specifically, right? And, who would be covered and who would not be. So absolutely there is discussion around that. There's also some concern from some of the states coming in saying, some National Guard, they don't move when they're deployed, right? So their kids remain in the same school. So should they be treated the same or not? There's just a lot of discussion, right? And that's why, this has been talked about now at the national level for at least 2 to 3 years. And that's why it hasn't been sent out to the states to be amended into the compacts yet. So it's complex.
Yes, it is. And school from home kind of adds to that whole thing too. So
it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great brief. Thank you. That was great information.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy. And that was going to be my question about the National Guard as well, in terms of mobility. The perception is that they don't move as much even during deployment as another branch of the military.
Yeah, and I am not an expert on the National Guard, but I've been told that some National Guard can travel between states. Obviously, some National Guard is deployed overseas. some National Guard, you know, even when they're deployed within the state, if their child has to go stay with a relative, you know, while they're deployed, the child, you know, their home might not move, but the child moves, you know, so there are some of those circumstances.
That makes sense. Well, thank you so much for your report. Are there any other questions that?
I just wanted to add also intrastate travel to that, Cindy, for National Guard, because I know that Oregon being a large geographic state actually creates that kind of a burden. School districts aren't super huge, so probably other states, even smaller states, experience the same thing. But we do have regular reassignment of troops within the state that would cause a need for some kind of a school liaison, maybe situation between school districts. So that if we're going to open it up to National Guard, I think that situation should also be highlighted.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So we're probably a couple of years out from the National Guard because once the national organization makes that decision, I think it's going to take at least 2 years for all of the states to consider it and adopt, you know, the 2-year legislative cycle. So that's what I'm saying. We're a couple of years out from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I have a comment.
Yes, Director Russell.
Yeah. I've said before that I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this and be involved, as I was one of those children whose dad was active military for 25 years. And quite honestly, I don't know that I can tell you how many different schools I attended as a result of his PCS assignments and his being away to serve in 3 different wars while we were children and growing up. But I also was the parent of a child who had to move while I was on active duty. And as I recall, neither of these was in effect at that time. So I really appreciate being able to have this and know that we're serving our military families and children and paying much attention to that. So thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no further comments, we'll go ahead and move to Tammy Paroles, State Liaison for the Department of Defense. She has a presentation. Thank you, Tammy.
Chair Howard and members of the council, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Tammy Paroles, and I'm with the Defense State Liaison Office. I've got some slides I'm going to go ahead and present, and we'll talk a little bit about what our office does and why I'm here today. So thanks. Let me go ahead and see if I can remember how to do this. It seems like every time I do, righty, let's go ahead and see if I can get this.
We see it. That's the start.
All right, great. All right. So this is a military family here, and this is the start of my presentation to kind of tell you a little bit about my office and what we do and the work that we've been doing in Oregon. I essentially, to put it in simple terms, work for the Pentagon. I'm staff for the Pentagon, and I work on legislative issues. So my office, the Defense State Liaison Office, was established in 2004. We work for the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. I'm located at Joint Base Lewis McChord, and I cover 6 Western states. And we're sanctioned to just address certain issues that affect military families. These issues are specific to military family well-being, and they often have to do with education. In the past decade, we've passed about 700 legislative bills that make life better for the military community. And we helped pass the MIC-3 legislation in all 50 states. And I'll be, for transparency, that happened before I came to this position. My predecessor helped pass the MIC-3 legislation in the states that I cover. So our office is very committed to military families, and the previous Secretary of Defense, Secretary Esper, and the current Acting Secretary of Defense, Secretary Miller, have an added line of effort to the National Defense Strategy. And that's the added line of effort is taking care of service members and their families. Normally, the National Defense Strategy just has 3 lines of effort in it. And in September of last year, Secretary Esper added a line of effort saying that taking care of service members and families really had 2 parts to it. One was education, and one was ensuring that families had the opportunity to improve employment for military spouses. And so education has become an even more important focus for the military. Military children, as you've seen in the previous presentation, move about 6 to 9 times, and 80% of them attend public schools. So we talked about that data and how those numbers don't always line up. The DMDC data that I have has that we have about 2,500 active duty children in Oregon. So, but that's 0 to 18 children. So those go all the way down to to our smallest children, and about 8,743 National Guard and Reserve children. So that's DMDC data, that's not self-reported. I wanted to, just so you understand how our office fits in, give a little MIC3 history on the organization timeline. So our office was involved in helping set up the compact, and we went out and our office was engaged in that, getting the legislation off the ground in each of the 50 states. And we did those helped do those initial discussions in getting the states ready to do the legislation. And previously what it had been is a series of MOUs that were out there in each of the states. So back in 2006 and 2007, there was the early drafting of the compact. And so think of the compact as an agreement between each state. So each state is all 50 states have an agreement between each other. It's not federal legislation, it's an agreement between each of the states. And then as each of those states made an agreement, more and more states joined into that agreement, and our office helped those states make that agreement. But the real organizing authority of that was the Council of State Governments National Center for Interstate Compacts. The National Center for Interstate Compacts, the Council of State Governments, helps organize these compacts that put together multiple states to do things not just like the MIC3, but also compacts between states like Washington and Oregon when they're doing a compact for the Columbia River, or when they're doing an agreement around rangeland, or when they're doing an agreement, or when states are doing an agreement around the Snake River, or how to deal with prisoners. So there's a variety of compacts out there in the nation. This, though, is one of the most unique compacts in the nation because it covers all 50 states. So it's really a unique and powerful compact. There's nothing else like it in the nation, and you should be really excited and proud to be part of it. It took many years to come to this agreement, and it's pretty exciting that it's where it's at now. And that's why when Cindy talks about reopening it to the National Guard and Reserves, it is such a big decision to be made. So celebrated in 2014, the adoption by all 50 states. And it wasn't until 2017 that the Department of Defense finalized what its responsibilities would be with the compact. And I'm just going to hit on a couple of these things so you understand what the Department of Defense's role is with the compact, because really this is an agreement between the states, and the Department of Defense has limited responsibility, but we still are involved. And the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, and that's the office I work under, oversees the implementation of instructions. And it helps designate the military representatives like Kelly and like Admiral Barnett to sit on the state councils. So each state council has a designated official. And in Washington State, that's someone from the Army. In Oregon, it's someone from the Navy. And in each state, there's a designated official that sits on the MIC3 commission. And they maintain a roster of those designated liaisons, and they monitor issues. Then there's the director of DODEA, which is responsible for coordinating with the MIC3 commission, and the secretaries in the military departments are responsible for specific requirements to coordinate with the MIC3 as well. And I'm happy to provide a copy of these instructions for specifically what the Department of Defense is required to do with the MIC3 commission as well. So I want to move to a new topic. This is the 2019 legislative session and some legislation that our office worked on in the 2019 legislative session. And we worked on some legislation called Advanced Enrollment in 2019. And this was Senate Bill 802. It was sponsored by the Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee. This was Senator Olson's committee. And this is not part of the MIC3, but it supported the MIC3 in many ways, in that it allows military children to be considered a resident of a school district for purposes of enrollment and class placement based on official military order for transfer of parent or of a parent of child. So what this does is, if a child is moving and a family is moving into the state of Oregon, they are if families moving into the state of Oregon and they're coming into the state in August or September during PCS season, they can call or email the school in advance where they know they're going to be coming to and say, I have military orders saying that I'm coming to the Beaverton School District. And we know where we're going to be living. We know what school we're going to be in. And we need to enroll at the same time as the other students in this school district are enrolling. We have military orders. We need to enroll at the same time as other students are being allowed to enroll. Not earlier than other students are being allowed to enroll, but at the same time as other students are allowed to enroll. And this allows military students to not be left behind and be having to enroll later than other students. This ensures that they can enroll at the same time as other students based on their military orders. So then when they get to this district, they've already been enrolled. They already have the capacity to have have signed up for those advanced placement classes, or if they needed some type of other additional classes, they've been able to get those classes. So that was Senate Bill 802, which passed in 2019. I'm going to talk about two pieces of legislation which we are proposing for this legislative session. One is virtual schools. And this is the opportunity for states to minimize disruptions in education for military children by allowing them to participate in technology-based educational opportunities while transitioning between duty stations. So this is if a student was currently participating in a virtual school program in the state of Oregon, and their family had to PCS or depart the state of Oregon toward the end of that virtual school program. So partway through that virtual school program. This would be the opportunity for them to remain in that virtual school program as they were departing that program, and allow them to complete that program without having to disenroll and lose that credit for that program. So allow them to continue studying and complete that program. So the MIC3 does not provide this opportunity from transition. It doesn't address virtual school support. but this is something that I have brought to the attention of some legislators. We don't have any sort of legislation pending for this for 2021. Another possible legislative issue for 2021 is the Purple Star Schools program. There's a national advocate for this program. This is something that the Military Child Education Coalition, which Kelly mentioned, is the Purple Star Schools program. It's a recognition program, and this would need to be a program that your board would want to support before this moved forward to any sort of legislation. This is a state-sponsored recognition program designed to emphasize the importance of assisting military children with school transition, and it also focuses on military service and civic responsibility. The Msec is the national advocate for this program, and there's currently programs in Arkansas, Georgia, Indiana, Montana, and many other states. About 10 states have adopted this program. This program really focuses on recognizing children who and providing children who are military as a sort of that April Purple Up type of recognition, and then also doing the following things by ensuring there's a designated school staff that understands how to liaise with military students and requires some professional development for military connected student issues, but it also does some civics training. But the state is the one that determines what the requirements are. These are just some things that have been done in other states. So this program can be what the state wants it to be. It doesn't have to be these things. It can be what the state wants it to be. So if the state wants it to focus on civics and wants it to focus, just do some very basic things around the military, that's what it can do. So it really looks at how can we provide some equity for our military students, and how can we build a rapport to make sure our military students are feeling welcomed and equitable, especially in these school districts where they may not be recognized when their families of these National Guard and Reserve students are deployed. And then I think that is my last slide. Went through those fairly quickly. I'm available for your questions. I do come from the Army, so I always say beat Navy. And I think that we really are here to kind of support whatever your efforts are in the state to support your military children. Oregon is a unique state in that you're always really ready to support your military children and your population, and we're here to do what we can to coordinate with your efforts. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Yes, Director Colonna.
First, a comment and then a question. The comment would be, for whatever process would be necessary, I would hope that we would move forward on the Purple Star Schools program, whatever it might take on the board level to support that. And then secondly, I do have a question for State Liaison Peralt, and that is, Tammy, some years back, there was a meta-analysis done on all the reasons why students drop out of schools. And the number one finding at that time was the conditions caused by mobility. So when you indicated that the average military family child is moved 6 to 8 times, I would think that there could be some significant issues around dropouts, although whenever we talk about this program and the good that it does, and I'm sure that it does, it would be really interesting to see what the rates of dropouts would be between military children and their moves as compared to children that are not in the military and their dropout rates. And I think what it would show that the program that we're talking about today definitely is a help. I think that would be really beneficial data to have forward. I'm very sorry that I can't give you the site on that meta-analysis, but I do believe that it could be found. So just wanted to mention that item, and thank you for your very good presentation.
Director, thank you very much for your comments.
Yes, thank you, Director Colonna. I had a question for Cindy, Commissioner Hunt, and the question was around what role or how would the State Board of Education go about learning more about the Purple Star program. So we'll work with Oregon Department of Education staff to get a presentation in January or February at our meeting as an informational, so we can learn more about that program. To Director Colonna's point, to Liaison's Parole's point, in terms of sense of belonging and inclusion, a sense of feeling welcomed. It feels like it would be a really strong opportunity to support students, military students in this way. So if there are no further comments or questions for State Liaison Parole. All right, so we are going to thank you, first of all, to Lieutenant Colonel Bates, our Vice Chair of the Military Compact Commission, and to State Liaison Parole for her presentation, to this educator liaison, Shees, did I say that correctly? Shees? To our Oregon Compact Commissioner Hunt, presentations today. The State Board of Education will convene shortly following this meeting, so I ask that directors and members do not leave this Zoom meeting because we're going to use the same video call. Members of the public who are viewing the live stream, we're going to have a short break, and we will be returning to convene the State Board meeting at 10:05. And we are really pleased to have had this opportunity with the Interstate Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children Council today, and our meeting is officially adjourned.